Speaking. Great. So this is being recorded. Thank you everyone for attending wherever you are, whether it be the evening or the morning or nighttime. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land throughout Australia and recognise their ongoing connection to land, waters and community. I'd like to pay my respect to their cultures, to elders past and present. My name is Noor Azizah, and I'm the co-founder and director of the Rohingya Maya Final Collaborative Network. We are a refugee-led, Rohingya-led and women-led organisation. It is my absolute pleasure today to moderate today's panel, featuring both refugee and non-refugee speakers who bring extremely important insights to our work. I'm also going to be sharing a little bit about my own displacement story and discussing the ongoing Rohingya genocide. To start off with, I'm going to be speaking about Amnesty's pledge that they made at the GRF last year in 2023. So Amnesty International is Australia specifically, is dedicated to supporting Rohingya refugees by urging Australia to increase its annual humanitarian program to 40,000 places, including expanding community-sponsored spots to 10,000 per year. Amnesty highlights the urgent needs for vulnerable refugee populations through global research, emphasising resettlements as a crucial life-saving measure. The advocacy aims to build momentum within Australia for increased resettlement, which we spoke about at the CRCP last week in Geneva, bolstered by meaningful refugee participation. By reshaping media narratives, which will be covered today by some of the refugee speakers, and hosting inclusive events just like this one. Amnesty aims to foster a more supportive environment for refugees and asylum seekers. Amnesty's goal is to integrate Australia into regional resettlement efforts with a focus on Rohingya refugees specifically. So Craig Foster, he visited the camps recently and also recorded a documentary which he launched last Saturday to increase awareness about the Rohingya crisis, given that it's in our region. Again, my name is Noor Azizah. I'm an extremely proud Indigenous Rohingya woman from Arakan, known as Rakhine, state of Burma, Myanmar. So I was born in 1995 during a period when waves of violence occurred against the Rohingya in our ancestral homeland. My parents, alongside my two older sisters, my two older brothers, and myself as a baby, who had to flee due to the escalating persecution of the Rohingya. There were no opportunities to thrive, and my parents predicted that the violence would only increase, which later proved extremely correct. They believed that inaction would lead to the deaths of their children. They couldn't envision a future for their children in their ancestral homeland. We started our journey through Southeast Asia on foot, walking through dense jungles and hopping on any boat that would take us to land. We ate what scraps of food we could find. We took local buses. We relied on the generosity of locals, and we ended up on a small island in Sabah, Malaysia. My memories of the initial journey is extremely blurry because I was just a baby at that time. But most of the memories that I remember is 8.5 years of displacement in Malaysia, in Sabah. Yet the journey is extremely common, and we've seen this journey occur in the last few years, in the last few months, from Arakan, from Bangladesh to Aceh, Indonesia, and to Malaysia. So this story is a tragic echo of many, many, many stories of Rohingya families, fueled by absolute desperation and desire to protect their children. Many parents take this life-threatening journey across lands and oceans because it is the much safer option than being in Arakan. So this active genocide against us has lasted for 82 years till today. Make no mistake, it is an extremely planned and systematic genocide. This genocide draws on many familiar tools from the oppressor's toolbox, including compulsory labor, Rohingya being stripped away from citizenship in 1982. So I was born as a stateless person. Land dispossession, physical violence, restrictions on marriage, closure of mosques, denial of access to education, regulation of families, burning of villages and homes, and the use of rape as a military tactic and form of psychological torture, which has led to about 10,000 children being born from genocidal rape. So it's extremely important to note that the main perpetrator, the military junta, has utilized the general Bama people, which is the Burmese people, to conduct the genocide. In 2017, we saw a mass displacement of 700,000 Rohingya fleeing to Bangladesh in response to Operation Clearance. The Burmese military armed and trained non-Rohingya and non-Muslim Rakhine people before the attacks. They visited each Rohingya household and removed any weapons and knives, leaving the Rohingya without any tools to fight back. So this so-called operation led to the immediate deaths of more than 24,000 Rohingya, and countless others died as a result of the Operation Clearance. Now, fast forward to 2024, May 17th, last month, we had armed gunmen ordered Rohingya families in Arakan Butidong specifically to evacuate by 10 a.m. The next morning, May 18th, I woke to videos showing my mother's village ablaze. That evening, my mother called, speaking with her nephew, who feared it might be their last conversation, as the junta and the Rakhine army has intensified their final killings of Rohingya. So junta's severe restrictions on cameras, the internet, and the communication have severely limited coverage and contact. Meanwhile, clashes between the Rakhine army and the Burmese military junta continue to perpetrate genocide against Rohingya, resulting in the displacement of 45,000 in the last 4 weeks, and also 200,000 being further internally displaced in Arakan in Burma. So we've seen mass arrivals of Rohingya fleeing to neighboring countries such as Malaysia, Indonesia, and Thailand. And this will only increase as we see new waves of violence. So how are Rohingya being met in the region, and double standards that we're seeing as well that we have to speak about? Due to misinformation, disinformation, and hate speech, Rohingya fleeing genocide are facing hostility in the region, which is manifesting into physical violence. Personally, visiting my Rohingya brothers and sisters in Malaysia and Indonesia in the recent months, witnessed their anxiety. On a day where 2 million Indonesians protested for Gaza, a boat carrying Rohingya in Aceh was turned away. A Rohingya mother with 2 young children recounted to the BBC how one of her children died from starvation. And how did she bury her child? She had to throw her child in the ocean. Where are the protests? Where are the voices of outrage? Where is the Instagram protest hashtag? There is a clear double standard arising out of racism, colorism, and selective empathy. I've faced online attacks myself. A video posted by UNHCR Asia, where I expressed that the Rohingya want to return home, received around 5,500 comments, many from hate bots or real people too, branding us as too black, too dark, too uncivilized, and animal-like. One comment that really hit me asked, why did the military junta not finish their job and just kill them all? Now, reflecting on this, I think about my people that are suffering in the region. If I myself, a resettled Rohingya refugee, is receiving such treatment, imagine the Rohingya that are living in the region. Now, finally, I could elaborate extensively on the Rohingya genocide and tell stories of Rohingya displacement in ASEAN and tell stories of my displacement in Malaysia. The situation is truly not complex. Rohingya people are facing annihilation with various parties directly or indirectly perpetrating harm and escalating violence. There are now more Rohingya living outside Burma, Myanmar, within its borders. This just underscores the severity of the crisis. We've witnessed widespread demonstrations, protests, encampments, and global pressure on issues like Gaza. Yet when world leaders act on the Rohingya, they are criticised for their inaction on other issues. When we finally get any small amount of attention, it is taken away from us and given to those deemed more deserving. Similar solidarity can and should be extended to the Rohingya, as we are defined by the United Nations as the most persecuted minority worldwide. We hope to see Arakan rebuilt and reclaim what has been taken away from us in the last 82 years. Now I'm going to pass the mic to Zaki Haidari. He is the campaigner at Amnesty International Australia. So over to you, Zaki. The mic is yours.
Thank you, Noor. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Good evening, colleagues, friends, and supporters of refugees and forcibly displaced people. It's an honor for me to share this webinar with some amazing friends and colleagues who I deeply admire, both individuals and for their relentless work in advocating for refugee rights. We are very fortunate that they have kindly accepted to offer their time, knowledge, and wisdom with us this evening. As we celebrate Refugee Week, we gather to honor our shared values of humanity, kindness, resilience, particularly that of refugees. We celebrate their journeys in finding safety, freedom in a place to call safe home. This year's theme for Refugee Week is Finding Freedom, with a focus on family. I am a refugee from Afghanistan, and I have been living in Australia for over 12 years. Throughout this time, I have never stopped searching for safety and freedom. I sought asylum by sea when I was very young. As many of you may be aware of the harsh asylum policies that prevented me and thousands of other refugees from having freedom of movement in seeing our families and loved ones. However, after 11 long years of fighting for justice, I was finally able to welcome my family to Australia and receive my permanent protection. Now, I truly enjoy the freedom and safety of being with my family. This experience is why I work at Amnesty International Australia, continuing to advocate for rights of refugees and forcibly displaced people here in Australia and globally. To join me in this movement and to continue advocating for refugee rights, please stay until the end of the webinar. My dear colleague, Betty, will guide you on how to get involved. Once again, thank you for joining us this evening, and thank you for your continued support. Please stay and listen to our amazing guest speakers. Thanks, Noor.
Thanks, Zaki. Are you going to play the video to introduce our amazing refugee speakers?
Yes, Betty will do that.
Okay, so can everyone see my screen? Amazing.
My name is Hedayat Osyan, and I'm a former refugee from Afghanistan. I run a social enterprise. It's called Community Construction. I am the founder and CEO. I was born in a regional part of Afghanistan. I had a very happy and peaceful life with my families and my community until the Taliban came in 2009 and they destroyed my whole childhood. They're destroying the village, they're burning the house. And my mom told me, you have to leave Afghanistan because this time they're going to take you as well. After 9 days in a boat journey from Indonesia to Christmas Island, when we got to Christmas Island, the Australian government, they put in a detention center. I was in Christmas Island detention center for 3 months, and I did a couple of interviews. Finally, I was recognized as a genuine refugee, and I was released from detention center. So I was excited to embrace this new opportunity. So I moved to Western Sydney, where I tried to learn the language because I couldn't speak a word of English. So I went to English class. During this time, I was working part-time with Cumberland Council in Western Sydney. And also I was working with a few refugee-led organizations. And I just realized that there's a huge gap in the society. Most of refugees, they were struggling to find sustainable job. And those who get job, they were very exploited at the workforce because they don't speak English. They have lack of network. They don't have any family member to support them. So I decided to do something for them. And I did some research and I found that construction is booming in Australia. It's a huge industry. On the other hand, there's a huge labor shortage in this industry. And I thought it's a perfect match. So we can use this anti-resource refugee to fill this gap. So I started a very small tiling company in 2017 with my co-founder, Jahangir. And after a few months' time, we secured 3 big projects across New South Wales. Now I employed and trained 90 people. So you're working full-time as a tradies, and they're making a huge contribution to Australian society and the economy. It's a win-win game.
Such an amazing video. I'll play Chantal's as well.
My name is Chantal Mousad. I'm originally from Syria, Damascus. I came to Australia in May 2017 with my daughter, Ayla. The war started in Syria 2011. I had my daughter, Ayla, and I decided at that time to move out from Syria. Was very hard to me to continue my life as a single mom. And I couldn't back to the war zone. My daughter start growing up, start recognizing and realizing that things it's getting harder on me and her. I took decision to try to find a humanitarian visa for both of us. Literally, I came to Australia in 2017, in 8th of May 2017, with nothing, like just a few bags put behind myself, my family, close friends. I lost career, house, everything, just coming with few bags. Was very emotionally in the airport, like I'm leaving everything and coming to Australia. Part of my decision to migrate to Australia, so I don't want my daughter to grow up in an area judging her as a female or comparing her to male. This is what was a big responsibility to me to bring her over to Australia. So her limitation is her imagination. Yeah, my daughter Ayla, she's an artist. She's playing football, going to the beach, swim, gymnastic. Now she is in the debating team for school, competing other school. She gets scholarship because she's smart, and this is part of the beautiful things in Australia when you are working hard. And I feel she's doing great. I believe that she's doing great. And here in Australia, she will get the best also education. As a newcomer refugee from Middle East and single mom, the freedom that we have it in this country, I can't evaluate this. It's amazing.
Wow, I was truly inspired by the work of Hedayat and Chantal, 2 really incredible refugee leaders that showcases the resilience of refugees. Now I'm going to pull everyone back to the Rohingya crisis and introduce Paul Power. Paul Power has been the CEO of the Refugee Council of Australia since 2006. Now, Paul, since Amnesty is heavily focused on the Rohingya crisis, can you give us a bit of assistance and details on what Australia is committing to in terms of assistance?
Yeah, well, certainly at the Global Refugee Forum, the Australian government made a commitment, fairly open-ended commitment, or not a particularly specific commitment, but basically to become involved in resettlement from Bangladesh. The United States has actually been leading resettlement states in engaging with the government of Bangladesh on options for resettlement, and certainly the Australian government is has committed to provide some support. I think all of us collectively need to encourage the Australian government to go further in terms of the level of its commitment. But it's certainly positive news that the government of Bangladesh has actually shifted its opposition to resettlement. Australia was actually successfully resettling Rohingya refugees from Bangladesh principally to Queensland in about 2009 and 2010, but it was actually the government of Bangladesh that put a stop to it. So now that the attitude of the Bangladeshi government has shifted, it's a real positive opportunity for Australia to get involved in providing constructive solutions, and really providing hope for a greater number of Rohingya that there could be alternatives to indefinite encampment.
Great. That's really, really fantastic to hear. Now, how are other countries like Canada and the US, others responding to the current displacement crisis? Sudan, for example, is facing one of the worst displacement crises they've ever faced. Can you give us a bit of information about this?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the UNHCR has just published the most recent statistics, for the 2023 year as part of its global trends report. And in fact, the Refugee Council today has published a sort of a summary from an Australian perspective, which I encourage people to have a look at. And I think, there's a couple of ways of looking at current displacement. I mean, you can either be overwhelmed by the numbers, because the numbers are quite overwhelming. There's 117 million people forcibly displaced, and 43.4 million of them are classified by UNHCR as refugees. That includes 6 million Palestinians, 5.8 million Venezuelans who don't have refugee status but are in fact refugees, and 31.6 million refugees around the world that are under the mandate of UNHCR. But another way of looking at it is that the majority of those people who are refugees and are forcibly displaced come from a very small number of countries. And in fact, it highlights the fact that international action to address displacement from the countries that are displacing the largest numbers of people, really needs to be seriously pursued by the international community. If you look at that figure of 43.4 million refugees, 70% or more than 70% are from just 5 situations: from Afghanistan, Syria, Ukraine, the Palestinian situation in the Middle East, and Venezuela. And then if you add another 4 and look at the 10 countries where most of the people who are refugees have come from, that includes South Sudan, Myanmar, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, they actually account for 85% of all people who've been displaced outside of the borders of their countries. So, it really opens up the, questions about what the international community can do to address the situations in each of those 10 countries. And of course, it's challenging. I mean, as you've outlined the situation to some extent in Myanmar. It's solutions are not easy to find, but I think we can also see that the international community has actually done very, very little to address root causes in each of these countries. And there's a sort of collecting, throwing up of hands when people are displaced as a result of something which can easily be predicted. In terms of resettlement, is obviously a really valuable solution. The challenge, of course, is that resettlement's available to too few people. The latest UNHCR figures tell us that last year, 158,000 refugees were resettled, but 79.5% of them were to just 2 countries: the United States, which received 75,000 resettled refugees, in Canada with 51,000. So, and both countries have elections in the next year to 18 months. So sadly, resettlement is very heavily dependent on the outcome of the US and Canadian elections. So certainly, for Australia to commit to keep increasing the refugee program in line with what the ALP has promised, I think is fundamentally important. It's also important for Australia to engage with countries in the region to look at how incremental steps can be taken to, improve life for refugees, to address the most critical issues that people are facing, that sort of fear of detention, the lack of legal status, the lack of the right to work for many refugees, and access to health and education are fundamentally important things which would make a difference for people in the short term while longer term solutions are being pursued.
Thank you so much, Paul, for covering that really, really beautifully. I'm going to move on to the next speaker, Hedayat. Hedayat Osyan is pioneering work opportunities for refugees, a critical effort during Australia's current housing crisis. Unfortunately, this crisis often leads the public to misplace their frustrations on refugees rather than the policymakers responsible. It is extremely important to remember that a significant number of male refugees, about 41.8%, find employment in the construction industry. So to be absolutely frank, these refugees are in fact building the beautiful homes that we all live in and that all Australians are living in, making substantial contributions to our society. Despite this, refugees are once again being scapegoated for public concerns. Hedayat, we would love to hear more about your work and the importance of meaningful employment opportunities for newly arrived refugees. The mic is yours.
Thank you, Noor, and also thanks everyone for joining today. So as I mentioned to my video, it's a win-win game. Refugees and asylum seeker, they bring a lot of new diversity, new skills and experience to the Australian economy. As you know, there's 90,000 labour shortage in the construction industry right now. It's not just in Australia, all across the world. I just read an article in USA. There's going to be 345,000 people labour shortage in the construction by 2028. So it's a shortage all across the developed country, and we can use this untapped resource to fill this gap. So it's going to be a win-win game. I had a trip to WA just 2 months ago, and I had meeting with a lot of builder construction company, and they were all saying we're really losing many billions of dollars because we cannot find enough labor and tradies to finish our project. And they're supposed to build 28,000 houses, but they're only building 18,000. And that's how much impact the whole Australian economy, just for a small state WA. It's all across Australia, that's the same thing happening. So that's why I think our business and also our employees are testament to that. That shows that if you give them equal opportunity, they will make a huge contribution to the Australian society, the Australian economy, and also they will be a good asset for the society. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Hedayat. It's extremely important to highlight the beyond success stories. It's important for us to highlight the contributions that refugees make in Australian society. Now, over to Chantal. Chantal, could you tell us a little bit about your personal journey and the experiences that has shaped the person you are today? I was reading your bio and I was completely mind blown. I know you're a woman in business, in the banking world. Now, what were some of the obstacles you encountered upon your arrival, and tell us how you navigated them?
Okay. Can you hear me? Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us and also managing all this panel. I would like to highlight more about my journey when I arrived to Australia. Like from day one, Noor, I can tell you, I push myself outside of my comfort zone. And I would really like to encourage any refugee who's coming new to Australia to push themselves out from their comfort zone, even out of the zone and the suburb of their community, I'm not saying ignoring the community, but that will help helping to shape their personality, adjust themselves in the new work environment, study environment, and the culture environment. I just was willing to do anything that people ask me to do it. Even I step up as a chief risk officer overseas, working in 7 countries, 16 cities around the world to start washing dishes and doing a lot of cleanups, gain some money, and at the same time understanding the work environment. That was very important. It was very hard mentally, physically. My daughter was only almost between 3 years old, 4 years old, very little, still need a lot of caring. So this is the way that I encourage myself to be who I am today, to be honest.
Wow, well, we definitely truly inspired by you and the work that you do and by your amazing daughter. Now, it looks like we are on time, which is very rare to see on a panel. So hats off to our speakers. I'm sure many of you have questions or comments. I'm going to open the floor for a bit of discussion. So if you do have a question, please put in the chat and the tech support will place the question, or if it's a comment for any of our speakers.
Noor, I just would like to raise what I'm doing now in 5-6 years, stepping down from chief risk officer, touching the bottom mentally and physically was very hard to me. I struggle a lot with the lack of, from finance perspective, not recognizing my qualification overseas and all my experience, and now who I am. I'm a senior manager now at Westpac Group for Risk and Compliance, also a board director in Career Seekers, the non-for-profit organization who's helped me to find my first opportunity with the Commonwealth Bank as intern. And then I found my way with Westpac, and also I am an ambassador for Westpac Foundation, supporting their mission with assessing all the non-for-profit and charity to give them a grant and supporting them in any startup and the new initiative can help and support our community. I'm supporting also Happy Brain Education in Melbourne. This is a great organization doing a lot of tutoring and activities from education perspective to the refugee kids from 5 years old to 18 years old. And I went through this mission because I really struggle to educate my daughter when we came to here from English from zero. And also I'm acting regional director for APAC and head of Oceania for the Global Resource Advisory Board. We are trying to identify non-for-profit or profit organization startup, supporting them to build their board from the zero. And our mission also to supporting the female founder and who they having a startup company, because what we identify is those female, they have less opportunity than the male to identify any grant and support in their startup company. I continue to educate myself because I face no one recognize my qualification overseas. So I'm doing MBA. I'm MBA now candidate awarded by United Nations of Women Scholarship. All of that in 6 years. I would like, it's a country for chances. I would like to encourage everyone to work hard, so they will find and they will be where Hedayat now, where yourself now, and where Zaki, Betty, and Paul, and everyone. That's it.
Chantal, you are truly a woman of everything. What you've achieved in 6 years something that nobody can achieve in a lifetime. So again, really showcases when refugees are given the opportunity and resources, we're able to make that meaningful contribution to society. So I think it's an important reminder for Australia to think about where the resources are going and who are appreciating the resources. Now, I'm going to ask the attendees if there are any questions or any comments for any of our speakers. I can see there is one person that wrote in the chat. Arish wrote, what a wonderful panel of speakers. Thank you for sharing your stories. Chantal, there's a question for you. Amazing achievements. Would love to connect with you. Can you share the speakers' link profiles? I'm sure the organizers of Amnesty can definitely do that for you. If there are any other questions or comments?
I have a question to Hedayat. Like, have you seen yourself today with all of us and the attendants, like telling your story, and you are the founder of your company and the CEO, or just you threw yourself in the boat and start your journey?
Sorry, I just missed the first part. Can you please repeat the question?
Like, before, excuse me to say that, throwing yourself in the boat and coming to Australia, have you seen yourself in this now, the frame, like where we are right now, all of us, with Paul, Noor, Zaki, and the who's attending this webinar, or
Yep.
like I really would like
Yes,
to hear how you achieve all of that.
Yep. That's a great question. So as I came from Afghanistan, and I am from a persecuted ethnicity, and we were not allowed to go to high school, university, and we were almost banned from everything. And then when I arrived in Christmas Island, I had the same mentality, and I thought if I reach out to Australia, probably I'm going to have the same challenges. And then there was a security officer, and I asked him, I don't have a very strong eyes vision. If I get to Australia, am I allowed to drive a car? And that was my like kind of expectation from Australia. Probably I wouldn't be able to drive in Australia because I don't have stronger eyes. I wouldn't imagine that I will ended up running a social enterprise helping over 100 people. So that shows that Australia is a land of opportunity, and that's why I'm very grateful for this beautiful country. They gave me a second chance, and I really appreciate that. And that's why I really work hard to contribute, make this country a better place for everyone. So Australia is a unique country, and I was privileged and to travel Europe last year 3 times, and I saw lots of people struggling in Europe. Compared to Australia, they faced a lot of challenges, but in Australia, we are very unique and we are lucky.
Thank you, Hedayat. I find it really interesting sometimes. We often have to, as refugees, we have to achieve so much just to prove that we should be able to live. And sometimes I find this a little bit contradicting as well, because we should be able to just come to Australia and just be human and also be able to make mistakes. We shouldn't have to achieve 10 master's degrees, 10 PhD degrees to prove that we deserve to receive resettlement. But again, I guess this is how humans work, and this is what works in advocacy. But that's just a reflection that I had. I have a few questions coming through. I might start with I have one comment from Anne. It has been an informative and inspirational webinar. Congratulations to all panelists. I say a resounding thank you. Sasha, this is a question. Thank you all for sharing. So inspiring. What are things that we can do as non-refugees to best support refugee settlements in Australia? Is direct action support best? Reading and understanding histories, protesting Australian refugee legislation, or a combination of all three? So there are about 3 questions in that. So maybe focus on the first one. What are things that we can do as non-refugees to best support refugee settlements in Australia?
I would like to, yeah,
Okay, you go, you go,
Hidayat.
Chantal, you go first. That's okay.
Okay, very quick. The most important for Sasha, I don't know what are you doing for work or where you are in your age right now, but the most important to refugee, not only eat and sleep under roof, it's the most important to continue our life normally and give us a chance to contribute and pay back to this country. And the most important thing for us is securing jobs, securing income that will help us to be a role model to our community, sharing our idea, inspire people, support our family also financially, and give them the best education, and also give us the best education and life. So how you can do that? Please share as much as you can. Zaki's story, Noor's story, Hedayat's story, Betty, Paul's achievement, and there is a lot of people who they identify not refugee. They made a great initiative to find work to the refugee, and also there is a lot of refugee like Hedayat. They open a great opportunity to let the refugees settle and support them also mentally. Over to you, Hedayat.
Thank you. I think one of the simple things every Australian can do is becoming a mentor or like an English teacher for a refugee. Most of refugees, they come from very low education background, and also they are pretty much traumatized. They don't have that resource and also that time to learn the language and become fluent to communicate with the Australian people. So when they go to English class, there's a very overcrowded class. For example, most of refugees, they are living in Western Sydney. For example, if you just give an example in Sydney, and every class they go, there's like maybe 35, 40 people, and they don't have that time to communicate with teacher. And that's why after 1 year, 2 years, they finish English class, but still they cannot communicate with the Australian people. So if you can volunteer, just become a mentor or just an English teacher to connect with the refugee or refugee family, just talk with 1 hour or half an hour, or at least a couple of times per week. That will make a huge support for a family, so they can become familiar with the Australian culture. With they can improve their English, and also I give an example. My partner, she came from Afghanistan in 2016. She was very shy. She was very isolated, and then luckily through SSI support and also Western Sydney University, she found a mentor, and then she became like a teacher. She became like a man for her, and she navigate her, and then she finished English class, and then she finished childcare, and now ended up become a pathway coordinator at the White Box Enterprise, helping other refugees. Like that's a mentor make a huge impact on refugee life, because basically they need navigation in all their journey through how they're going to go to English class, how they can use public transport, how they can open up their bank account, how they can find job. So mentor make a huge support for a refugee. That makes like every Australian can do that one.
Thank you so much, both, for covering that very beautifully. I'd like to remind the audience that Hedayat was the winner of 2024 Les Murray Award. And this award recognizes outstanding former refugees that are bringing and raising awareness of the plight of forcibly displaced people. So congratulations on that award, Hedayat. We've got one question on the chat. Whoever would like to answer it, just organically. Refugees' resilience is often overemphasized. You can overcome all the obstacles and be overachievers. Do you think more needs to be done to support refugees' mental health and settlement processes?
I want to share a sad story regarding to the mental health. A friend of a friend of my friend, he was in Indonesia for nearly 9 years, and then finally he got Australian visa and he came to Sydney just 6 months ago, and he was struggling a lot in terms of mental health, but there was not enough support to help him overcome those trauma. He was separated from his family for over 12 years because he was 3 years in India and then he moved to Indonesia. After almost 12 years, ended up in Australia. Sadly, just 2 weeks ago, he moved back to Melbourne and he was trying to find a job. He found a part-time job. On his second day, he just jumped from the truck. There was a highway and he just suicided himself and he died. I think that shows that in this area need to be done. There's a loss of lack of resource. As I mentioned before, the majority of refugees, they are pretty much traumatized. They lost some of them family member. They have gone through a very tough journey. So when they come to Australia, they face a lot of challenges: how to find job, how to sponsor their families, how to cope with all those living costs, which even Australian people, they can struggle. So that makes them very tough, and they ended up becoming a victim. Yeah. So I think definitely this area need to be done a lot. Thank you.
Super sad. I wanted to pass the mic to Paul. Paul, you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, it's important to do anything we can to try to connect people to services that exist. I mean, there are, torture and trauma agencies in each state and territory, as well as other, mental health services that can provide support. But the challenge can often be that the, resources available are insufficient to meet their needs. But also, people can be reluctant to reach out for help. I mean, it goes against the grain for many people. As a male, I can say, it's often, men find, from any culture, find, seeking support in crisis situations difficult. So I think, to be aware of the services that do exist, the torture and trauma agencies in each state in particular are a good place to start. But I think it's really an important point that not everyone who's been a refugee has to be a great achiever. I mean, basically what we're talking about is a situation where people of all backgrounds, ordinary people and people with talent, find themselves in situations where they're forcibly displaced. So it's really the thing that binds people who've been refugees together is that the collective experience of forced displacement, which happens to people of all sorts of backgrounds in many situations. So and I think it's also, I mean, one of the things which is often lost in the discussion about Australia and its engagement with refugees is how many people have actually come to Australia as refugees. Next year sometime, the Australian government will issue the 1 millionth refugee visa since 1947. But in fact, there are significantly more people who've come to the country as refugees under other visa arrangements. And when you consider the children and grandchildren, who've been born in Australia into families where, both or one parent or grandparent has been a refugee, the refugee experience is actually very much a part of the Australian experience. But I mean, probably one of the saddest aspects of the heightened political debate about asylum over the past 20 years is this very, very positive aspect of Australia's national story has been lost. We're good as a nation, comparatively in receiving and welcoming refugees and providing opportunities. And yet, you wouldn't understand that from, the way in which Parliament debates issues related to asylum. So I think part of, what all of us as Australians of whatever background, need to be doing is actually reclaiming the positive aspects of Australia's engagement with refugees. Not only how Australia benefits greatly from the skill and work and commitment and spirit of people who've lost everything and had a chance to start again, But the fact that we've actually been doing, reasonably well for 75 years or more, and yet we often talk down both the contribution of refugees, but also our ability as a community to welcome people.
Thank you, Paul. I can see there are a few questions popping in, and I'm so sorry if we don't have time to thoroughly go over your questions, but each of the speaker will leave their profiles behind for you to reach out if you'd like to. But I can see Claudia over here has had a question about supporting children of refugees and the trauma. And I'd like to share a bit of the work that I do at Rohingya Maya Whainara Collaborative Network. So, Maya Whainara just means women in our language. So in Aceh, there are about 400 unaccompanied children and babies, and the children have lost their parents from the sea journeys. Either they've witnessed their parents drown or their parents have been detained in Malaysia or Indonesia. Currently, my organization, we've managed to secure funding for psychosocial support for 80 children only. And we've recently started that. We've had some counseling sessions that has occurred in the last few weeks. And this is one way of what we do as genocide survivors to assist our most vulnerable population amongst the Rohingya community. The early intervention that we see is extremely important, given that they don't have parents, they don't have caretakers, they're very much by themselves. I'm going to pass over to Betty. Let's hear from Betty to cover some calls to actions that we can take today.
Awesome. I would love to ask more questions as well, but I know we're coming to time. Hi, everyone. I am Betty. Thank you all for joining. I also want to say thank you to our guest speakers who are such prominent figures in the refugee space, but also in Australia. I'm a mobilising coordinator at Amnesty. I'm also, to Paul's point, a child of 2 refugees who had the rights and the opportunity to come to Australia and to live here. So I just want to emphasise that point. I'm going to share our campaign and what ways that you can support for our guest speakers. So outside of what our guest speakers have already shared, for Amnesty, the guest speakers have given an overview of experiences of refugees and people seeking asylum in Australia and globally. Like Paul shared earlier, the crisis or crises around the world has led up to 117 million refugees and forcibly displaced people around the world. And just to give everyone a figure, that's 1 in every 78 people, which is a huge ratio figure. And despite this, Australia has significantly reduced our refugee and humanitarian program, making our intake, unfortunately, one of the lowest in 45 years. In contrast, again, which was highlighted earlier, countries like United States and Canada are taking a much more significant role in this displacement globally. At Amnesty, our envision in Australia is for Australia to create safe pathways for refugees and people seeking asylum, making sure we're treating them with fairness, dignity, and respect. And we aim to set a global standard for the humane treatments of refugees around the world. So how can this be achieved at Amnesty and with your help? So we are aiming to build a powerful movement, and it all starts with grassroots efforts. So by engaging in meaningful conversations like today at a community level or grassroots level, we can change the hearts and minds of Australians. This will then create a groundswell of support that pressures the government to act. Now, in the refugee space, we find that we have the same passionate people that have the energy to be talking about refugee rights, but we do need to increase our movement. So when we look at a significant or other significant social movements and how they result in long-term policy change, there are several examples, and grassroots movements have always been a powerful force to make change. So by organising and participating in grassroots movements, we can create a more informed and compassionate society in Australia, ultimately leading to policy change to improve the lives of refugees. Some examples, there's one I want to highlight specifically in Australia, and that is the marriage equality movement. And that was very much led on a widespread of grassroots organisations and changing the hearts and minds of Australians, which then led to a policy change. So what does this look like? Oh, let me change slides. What does this look like for us and for you all for listening? So one initiative Amnesty is encouraging attendees and people to participate in is our community connection events. And these events are led by passionate individuals and activists like yourself and individuals with lived experience. And these events are designed to change the hearts of Australians by bringing them closer to real stories and experiences of refugees. So by sharing these powerful narratives, like today where we shared the experiences of 3 refugees, we aim to grow our movement and to change the collective minds and hearts of Australians. So by hosting these events, and I'll talk lightly about that shortly, we aim to inspire the attendees that are actually joining to host their own events and then creating a ripple effect through this movement. So these events can be really small with family and friends. They can be with your neighbourhood. I'm actually hosting one this weekend for Refugee Week. It could be with your colleagues if your colleagues have an hour for lunchtime, or it could be really large if you want to do something at a community hall and something quite organised. But to make your event more appealing and enjoyable for attendees, you can screen our short documentary. So Amnesty's recently launched The Forgotten People documentary. It's 20 minutes and it's about the Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh, which I just want to make note is the largest refugee camp in the world. And we do have other documentaries. We have one about South Sudan also coming out. So we've got the rights to a lot at Amnesty, and these documentaries are there to spark insightful discussions and engage people emotionally. And then you can also do Q&A sessions, group discussions, and other creative workshops or ideas. It's completely up to you. The concept is really simple. Engage in meaningful discussions with people. So as many people as you can, small or big, to discuss public opinions or people's opinions about refugee issues and why it's important that we support them. So the idea is to get everyone attending these events to then take action. So we do have a number of resources because this can be kind of daunting when you're doing it for the first time. So we've got our refugee toolkit, our community connection guide, and how to have persuasive conversations, because that in itself is a skill to have, especially when we're combating mis and disinformation about refugees. And there's so much more. We will include this in an email, so you don't have to go through our website just to make it easier. But that is our biggest ask. But I also just wanted to highlight something, some other asks that are a bit smaller. So you can attend a community connections event. So we do have an event section on our website if you want to attend something small first. And these are all the events that are public. Another way you can support is having conversations with family and friends. So something Zaki said when I first started Amnesty early last year was we're trying to persuade the middle ground. We have 3 groups. We've got the people that are for refugees, the ones in the middle that don't really understand refugee rights or what they've gone through and what impact we can make. And then we've got the people on the right who we don't aim to change or persuade. So having conversations with family and friends in the community is a really good way to tackle that. You can join our national Facebook group, and this group is for activists. We also have a Slack channel that we give updates for activists too. You can join our Refugee Rights Network. You can take and share urgent action. So we've got 2 at the moment. We've got the petition to increase the Australian refugee intake, and then we've got our email your senator now and tell them to vote against the entry ban and deportation bill. And for us, the most important thing you can do is use our resources to understand the refugee crisis, to stay updated on refugee issues, and to learn how to effectively advocate for their rights. But more importantly, to be hearing and centering refugee experiences at everything. So just making sure you're following key figures. I'm sure our guest speakers will share LinkedIn and socials on the chat, no pressure. But if you do, just making sure you're staying engaged. But it's really crucial that we come together as a community to build the movement and amplify the voices of refugees and to advocate for a safer future. So by hosting or attending these community events, for example, or by taking action, like it could be a quick action like signing a petition, you're playing a crucial role in the movement. But yes, thank you all for letting me speak with you all. I feel like I was a guest for the majority of it, and you're all very inspiring, but I hope that attendees take action and want to host something small with family and friends or with their community and stay engaged.
Thank you so much, Betty. And I know we're just 1 minute over time, but please bear with us. We are nearly done. as we are about to wrap up. Thank you all for joining us this evening or morning or nighttime, wherever you are, and for your thoughtful engagement in today's panel. We have had powerful testimonies and insights from all our speakers, shedding light to the pressing issues faced by refugees. In the face of adversity, individuals like Hedayat, Zaki, and Chantal are not only surviving, but thriving and contributing immensely to our society. The resilience and determination of refugees are extremely remarkable, and it is our collective responsibility to support them, not scapegoat them during crises like today in Australia, like the housing crisis. As we conclude, let us remember the importance of meaningful action. The stories shared today are not just about the past and about our present and future. The ongoing genocide against the Rohingya and the challenges faced by displaced people worldwide demand our attention and our advocacy. So let us all commit to amplifying their voices, advocating for policy changes, and fostering inclusive communities where every individual can live with dignity and hope. Together, we can make a difference. Thank you all once again for your participation. I hope you have a good morning, good night, or good evening. Panelists, if you would like to share your information on the chat for attendees to reach out to you, whether it be your website, your LinkedIn, or whatever you feel comfortable sharing, please go ahead and do that.
And we can also share it in the email to make it easier for people rushing to copy and paste that link.
Yeah, please. Cool.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Have a good day or night wherever you are. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.